Did you know that that was a baby that you were carrying?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you think it's a baby?
I'm aware of what I'm doing. I made the decision.
What are you doing?
I'm not letting my pregnancy go to term.
But what do you think that is? What is it if it's not a child?
It's a zygote, it's an embryo, it's a fucking fetus. It is not a child.
That embryo or that fetus has a mother and a father.
Not if they
what does
don't
that
want
make
it
them?
to.
That's still.
So I had an abortion because it wasn't a child.
You're being a little dehumanizing.
Yes, I am being dehumanizing because it is a clump of cells.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be reviewing Lila Rose's recent appearance on Jubilee, where she debates a whole bunch of abortion activists. This one gets very heated, guys. A lot of points to refute here and a lot of things to point out, actually. So let's start with the first lady, who is just the human embodiment of the demonic. Everything from her demeanor to her attitude and clear hatred towards Lila, to the look in her eyes, all just screams blood rituals and sacrifice. And you know what? Your boy Rattlesnake does not miss a thing. And when I saw her face, I remembered that she was the one who was in the audience in the Dr. Phil debate with Lila Rose.
I really think you're a traitor to your own, and I will never be able to agree with you.
So before we dive into it, let's just have a little look at the way that this woman greets Lila, who tries to actually extend a little bit of grace to her when they first meet each other here.
Hi.
Hi,
I'm
Lila.
Ceci.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, I mean, that just says everything. And maybe she was mad that Lila didn't recognize her. I wonder why. So let's watch the exchange.
So your claim is that there's no right for abortion under any circumstance at all, which obviously I disagree with because...
And I'll just define abortion really quick, just for clarity, because it was...
You don't really need to for me.
The intentional killing of a living...
Whatever you want to call it. I don't disagree with it. Anyway, so my point though is that there should be exception. I mean, I think you should be able to get it if you want one, but...
Under any circumstances?
For the 10-year-olds that are raped, which you know that 10-year-old in Ohio who was by her father, then was told she couldn't have an abortion, had to go to a different state. So you're more than comfortable with holding down a 10-year-old once again to make her do something with her body she doesn't want to do.
So an abortion is another act of violence in my view, both of that baby and of a rape survivor. I think this view that we have that abortion is somehow going to heal
Even
a
if
rape
that
survivor
10-year-old is crying and begging you, I don't want to give birth, I don't want to carry it for 9 months, I don't want to be a mom.
I think she deserves the best support and care. She needs to be taken out of that abusive situation.
Health care, and in this case would be an abortion.
But we can't take the life of an innocent child. I think in that case, an early delivery. If I can just finish.
No, you're affording more empathy toward a zygote more than you are a living, breathing 10-year-old who just went through something seriously traumatizing.
So
your empathy is in a place I don't understand.
If I can respond.
Now you can, absolutely.
So is absolutely horrific. Incest is absolutely horrific. We are completely aligned on that. We need more penalties for abusers. I think one of the things that I have about that case that I've seen is there's no story about what happened to her abuser. Was she protected from her abuser? It's like that's left out of the narrative.
Her father.
I mean, but what
I've heard you say before,
has she been protected?
You shouldn't punish a child for what you called generational sin.
But if I can finish.
But which child are you not? Which child do you want to punish?
You gotta let me make the case.
Is my
you gotta let
question.
me make the case.
Well, you're worried about punishing a child, but which one? The 10-year-old who was already punished?
Can I respond?
Now you can.
In a case of incest and there's a new life that's been conceived, there's another human being now we're talking about. It's not just the abuser and the victim. There's another potential victim.
There's a zygote.
And we need to care for both. They're both human beings. And in the case of a very young girl who's been the victim of a horrific assault, the idea—
You want to hold her down again.
The idea, well, in an abortion, you're literally held down and you have to submit your body to an act that will deliver
she would
a
want
forced
to have
child.
done
well, you're
rather
speaking
than the
for her.
other.
You're speaking for her right now.
We're talking about the 10-year-old who wanted to get that abortion.
But the point here is that there are human rights now in play for an unborn child and a born child. They both have rights. And I think the medical care is very key, as well as the counseling and the support that she deserves. And probably an early delivery would be what would be necessary to protect her health and to make sure that the baby would have a chance to live. But at the end of the day, you don't give the death penalty to the baby because they were conceived by a rapist.
Staying truly armed and dangerous amongst the propaganda today is nearly impossible, which is why I have been consistently using ground news for years now. Now, ground news is a revolutionary tool because instead of having to go to 50 different places to fully understand a story, they compile tens of thousands of sources from around the internet into one place, which literally does all of the hard work for you. One of the great features is the blind spot feature, which shows you the stories you may have missed because of political bias. Check out this story. House passes bill to deport immigrants with a history of sex offenses. Only 20% is being reported by the left and 80% by the right. But furthermore, we can click into the story and you can see how it is being reported by the left. Check this out. This story is titled "The 61 Democrats Who Backed Another Awful Republican Immigration Bill." The left is shaming the Democrats that backed this bill. And then we can see how it's being reported on the right. 145 House Democrats vote against bill requiring deportation of illegal migrants convicted of sex crimes. They are rightfully shaming the majority of Democrats that wanted to keep these people in the country. And guys, it's important to mention that this video is demonetized because of copyright. So without Ground users' support, this content does not happen. Plus, for Rattlesnake TV listeners, Ground News is offering a massive 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use. So all you need to do is hit those links in the bio or pinned at the top of the comments or the QR code on the screen right here and stay armed and dangerous while supporting a great company that supports independent content creators like myself. With that, let's get back into
because their father is an abuser. We don't even give the death penalty in this country to rapists. Were you aware of that?
My question for
you can't even get the death penalty for. Why would we be okay with giving the death penalty to a child because they're conceived in rape?
It's not a child.
What are they?
It's a zygote. It's an embryo.
What is an
fetus.
embryo? What is an embryo?
And I'm not going to get into the science behind it because the thing
you don't
now
think the science
is
matters?
Not in this argument right now.
So you don't
think there's no right for an abortion for any reason, but
that's
there
because
definitely are.
That's because,
like Nancy Davis in Louisiana, her child is going to be born with a crania, meaning without a skull. You thought, and you said this to her, you said, I think your child should have died in the loving arms of their parents instead of at the tools of the abortionist. Now, this woman was going to give birth to a child that will die within minutes of being born. So you're not bringing life into the world.
Do you know what abortion procedure would have been done on her baby?
That?
Do you know what abortion procedure would have been done on her baby? In a later term abortion that she had in the second trimester.
Emergency abortion.
If I can just complete my sentence here. Either there would have been a lethal injection of that baby to kill that baby, or that would have been a live dismemberment of that baby. Those are the abortion procedures used in the second or the third trimester.
And you don't think either one should have been
But you support that? Do you support that?
Okay, guys, so the one thing that I really have to point out here is that this is why it's so rare to get good female debaters, because they don't really understand boundaries the same way that men do. You see, when men communicate with each other, generally, and Dr. Peterson talks about this sometimes, there is the risk of force. If it gets pushed to a certain point, there could be a risk of a physical altercation. So we kind of have those boundaries with each other. Whereas women show aggression in a very different way with innuendo and reputation destruction and gossip. So when they communicate with each other, without that threat of force, they just don't have the same boundaries. So they're able to be extremely cruel to each other in conversation like this, and not in an overt way either, in a really sort of underhanded, bitchy way. And I mean, maybe not on camera, but just in everyday life. If a man ever treated you the way that that woman just treated Lila Rose, there would be a problem.
Can I respond?
Now you can.
Oh.
I mean, even with the best, even with Candace Owens and Michaela Peterson the other day, there was still a lot of the, okay, Michaela, okay, Candace, mean girl.
I think it's a mean girl high school tactic.
It was just very catty. So all of these sorts of female dynamics are just an absolute disaster when it comes to debate. Anyways, on to the next. And the gentleman here, Evan, who is debating, will actually be on Rattlesnake TV this week in our weekly debate, debating Christianity versus progressivism. So, sneak peek of what we've got to come.
Hi, Evan.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So my fundamental issue with a lot of pro-lifers is they have a misreading or a misunderstanding of why exactly we grant moral consideration to other humans. It is not, like your view, because we are simply of the human species and a live organism. Under your worldview, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the moment of conception that you have a right to life, and that right to life is equal amongst all human beings. Is that correct?
At the moment of fertilization, yes, we all have an equal right to life. When a single cell embryo, so the science shows us at the moment of fertilization, well, it's important, a single cell embryo comes into existence.
I'm not even disputing
that's unique
that.
and genetically distinct from his or her mother.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So you would prefer a world where there are less rights violations than a world where there are more rights violations. Is that correct?
Of course.
Of course. Okay. So in a world in which someone shot and killed a born human baby, you would prefer that world over someone destroying a tray full of frozen zygotes. Under your worldview, if that is a world in which there are more rights violations happening, a tray of frozen zygotes in petri dishes would be worse under your worldview than a world in which someone shot and killed a born baby.
Yeah,
can you concede to that?
I think we were talking about this sense
can
of
you concede whether or not that would
if you'll let me respond.
Sure.
So here's the deal. If there was a burning building, right? And I think you're kind of using this analogy with this tray of babies that are frozen, right? In vitro fertilization
Zygotes.
babies. Nobody
Nobody colloquially uses the term baby to refer to
human
zygotes,
embryos,
by the way.
human embryos.
Sure,
They're human embryos, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or the born baby. Yes, I mean, under the law of familiarity, and also if I was in a household and there was in the first room my son, in the second room some other person, I would pick my son.
I'm not asking in the law of familiarity. I'm asking under your ethical worldview with respect to rights violations, which is what we're discussing.
It doesn't mean that the embryos are less valuable or that the person in the room that I didn't choose to save is less valuable. This is really important.
But with respect to rights violations, I'm going to walking back because you're not actually. You're not directly actually responding.
I am trying to, if I may. If I want to save, in your analogy, this newborn baby from being shot, I think is what your analogy is, which is obviously horrible, or save this tray of embryos, human embryos who are in the in vitro fertilization clinic, yeah, I would pick that newborn baby. That's not because the embryos are less valuable.
So then you've just contradicted yourself because you said that you prefer a world in which there are less rights violations, but that would be a world in which there are more rights violations under your exact worldview, because you conceded earlier that at the moment of conception, we all have an equal right to life, which means if we have an equal right to life, all of those embryos have an equal rights to life, and that means there are more rights violations under the worldview in which the tray is destroyed versus the baby. To be clear, if there was a baby and it's like, go save that baby or go save these 10 men over there, I also might pick the baby. That doesn't mean that these 10 men are not valuable. And it doesn't mean that the 10 men don't have human rights. It's just that this is a baby right there. I'm not asking whether or not you have some personal empathy, more empathy towards a baby.
But I think that's what it's connected to. I think that's what it's connected to.
I'm specifically asking because we're discussing human rights, as you put it, because I also have all of us all have a much stronger form to empathy towards women. We don't have.
Sure, and if I could just say, sorry, time's up. That's okay.
So obviously he needed to let Lila Rose speak there, and we will not be putting up with any of that on Rattlesnake TV debate night, because we don't put up with anything that is unbecoming of the most civilized discourse on the internet.
Hi, Sassy.
Hi. So we were just talking about, you brought up the fact that you think doctors should be, what was it?
Liable if they commit abortions.
Now, because it's murder, in your opinion.
Yes, just like there are already statutes for illegal abortions.
My question to that is
just to be clear, there's already statutes for illegal abortions. But there's statutes against infanticide, etc.
Okay, anyway. But with the doctors, so do you think the doctor should be sent to prison? Like, if this is murder, why don't we treat it like murder?
It should be treated
because
like
it's not. Well, then if I hired a hitman to kill my husband, I'd still go to prison even if I didn't pull the trigger. Anyone involved
do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I don't think abortion is a bad thing, so I don't think that would ever be on the table
I
in
understand
my
that,
world.
but I think, yes, there should be penalties for people that kill other people.
So what do you think should happen to me? I had an abortion when I was 19. So what, in your mind, in your perfect world, what would happen to me?
So if abortion were banned now, I wouldn't want it to be retroactive for people that had abortions in the past.
No. I'm talking about, let's say I have one
Well, I think
tomorrow.
that's an important point.
Like, no.
If you had an abortion and it was banned.
I'm talking about now, because this is who affects people now.
Yeah.
So what do you think? If you think it's murder and you want to call it murder, why aren't you treating it like murder?
So you're saying
because what you do is actually villainize and shame women, and that has ripple effects throughout society.
So in this scenario, you're saying if abortion was banned and you went and had an abortion tomorrow, you're asking me what I think should happen.
Yeah, I want to know. Do you think I'm a murderer?
Well, here's the thing. I would want to know, did you know that was a baby that you were killing?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you think it's a baby?
I'm aware of what I'm doing. I made the decision.
What are you doing?
I'm not letting my pregnancy go to term.
But what do you think that is? Do you think you're ending the life of a human being?
You know, I'm not here to debate that, though. What I'm talking about right now, we're talking about the Constitution and law. And in law, I don't even know.
But if you can let me finish, it's important. In our criminal statute, there's different kinds of penalties or no penalties.
There's different types of murder, too. Self-defense. In the third trimester,
it depends on the amount of intent.
It depends on self-defense.
It depends on the amount of intent that goes into the act and the amount of knowledge and freedom that goes into the act.
But why do you get to decide that?
It's not me deciding that. That would be the law. That would be the law. Because the government's job is to protect human rights.
51 years
and the
ago
government
that we had
protects
the
children.
right to choose?
The government's job is to protect human rights, and that includes the human rights of children. Just because I'm a newborn baby,
it's not a child.
What is it then?
I'm so sick of people
if it's not
calling
a child,
it a kid when it's not a kid. It's not.
What is it if it's not a child?
It's a zygote. It's an embryo. It's a fucking fetus. It is not a child. I'm done. And I'm also done hearing you call women murderers.
That embryo or that fetus has a mother and a father.
Not if they
What does
don't
that
want
make
it
them?
to.
That's still a life. It's still a life.
According to you, nobody in the scientific
your life is
community
valuable
has
and
even
their life is
decided on
valuable.
when life starts. No one in the scientific community has decided on when life
That's
actually
inaccurate.
starts.
You can open any human biology
if you're talking
textbook,
about when they come together,
and it will
there's this
tell you
beautiful
at the
flash
moment
of
of
light that
fertilization,
happens.
you have a unique single cell embryo that's a unique
But it
individual
still
human
has to
life.
go through utero. It still has to go through all these phases.
Well,
okay?
and you looked a lot
And then
different when you were a newborn baby than you look now. We all look different at different phases in our human development. When you're a 10-week-old embryo, you're supposed to look like a 10-week-old embryo. You're not going to look like a newborn. You're not going to look like an adult.
So you don't-
Human
it's not
development, you look different at different stages.
So her argument there was, well, I mean, first and foremost, it wasn't an argument. It was an emotional diatribe spewing out her entire life's resentment at Lila, who she decided to make the object of her wrath. She was only interested in venting her emotion in Lila's direction, not in the debate whatsoever. So let's just clear that up. Which, by the way, I've said it before and I'll say it again. This segment desperately needs a moderator. Jubilee need to sort this out, seriously, because it is entertaining, but these people just speak over each other and they don't know how to debate. They don't understand the rules of discourse. So they need a moderator, and the top comments here reflect that.
That would be the law. Because the government's job is to protect human rights.
51
And the
years ago
government
that we had
protects
the right
children.
to choose.
The government
But the series of emotional words that sprang from this lady's face that she might sort of refer to as an argument were that Lila Rose thinks that abortion is murder. And then she asks Lila, well, why don't you treat it as murder? And Lila says, well, I think that we should treat it as murder, but obviously we don't at the moment. And then she says, well, if I hired a hitman to kill my husband, which I highly doubt she has a husband, by the way, I would still go to prison for murder. So you're saying that if you hired somebody to take another life, then you would be held criminally liable for that? Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Are you going to dispute that point? Or seriously though, how can somebody look at this debate and look at the demonic and murderous rhetoric and the dehumanization of babies and think, yep, I want to be on that side? Lila said the embryo or fetus has a mother or father, and she says, not if I don't want it to the rapturous applause and laughter of the room.
Not if they
What does
don't
that
want
make
it
them?
to.
that's still a life. That's still.
But speaking of demonic rhetoric, I mean, this next bit is wild.
Okay, so you had mentioned that regardless if it is illegal or not, women are still going to get abortions. So how do you justify the fact
They'll
that
have far less if it's illegal. The abortion rate goes down dramatically when it's illegal.
they're not going to report if they're doing it illegally because there's going to be repercussions? So
But
why
we
not?
we can prove that live births go up in states where abortion is illegal. That is the fact of what has happened after Dobbs v. Jackson, and some of the trigger laws went into effect and some states made abortion illegal. So we know more women are having babies. So even with unreported illegal abortions, live births are still going up.
But do you understand
the law
that people,
works.
when they know that abortion is illegal or that women have more difficulty receiving abortions, they're going to carry babies to term because they're out of fear of abortions. Why not? Why would you pretty much want to defund places like Planned Parenthood, places that actively help women have safe abortions, and then it further prevents miscarriages in the future if you allow them safe abortions?
What I really want to work against, and some of the work I'm trying to do now, is work against this narrative that gives women so much fear about children. We are told to fear pregnancy, we're told to fear birth, we're told to fear being mothers, and our society also tells us to celebrate abortion. And I think that's
We're
a very
not.
anti-woman view. And I think we should flip the script on that and instead say, actually, our superpower as women is the ability to bring life into the world and nurture life. Men can't do that.
Our superpower of women is the power to choose. That's feminism. The power of choice. If you want to be a mother or you don't want to be a mother, that's feminism. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, you want to go to work.
But the difference,
if
my
you
friend,
are
is this:
forced-
when you're pregnant, you're already a mother, and we
Okay.
can't deny the scientific reality of that human life.
If you
That is a human life, a child, a son or a daughter that has rights too.
If
So
you
we need to
force
protect
women
both.
to have pregnancies and you force women to basically change their entire life, we're not forcing the men to do that.
Well, I think we should force the men to do that. Quite
Okay,
frankly. I
great.
think
Well,
that-
have you met a man? You think they're going to do that? They're not going to do that. They're really
Well,
not.
What you're getting at, which I think is a really good point, is that we have this sort of approach in our society when it comes to sex and relationships, where men and women, and a lot of times men, I don't want to just say men do this, women do this too,
all genders,
where we treat this very maybe casually. We have this all backwards. Instead of looking at sex and relationships as something really beautiful, something you commit to for life, you sacrifice for the other person, you love that other person,
right.
And then if you conceive a baby, you love that baby, you fight for that baby. I think that is the view we should be moving towards as a society, instead of sex being casual. If you get pregnant, just have an abortion. The man abandons the woman.
Which is a very heterosexual view, because we're not including queer sex in this narrative, in which sometimes sex is
well, if the queer sex brings life into the world, either way, I think at the end of the day, we're still talking about human life.
That's great, but often, but in this regards, in this argument, we're not giving people sexual education. If you go into Planned Parenthood, they not only give abortions, they also provide STD testing. They allow men into Planned Parenthood, people without health insurance. If we're talking about healthcare as a right.
So Lila says here that the superpower of a woman is to have children, and she says no. The superpower of a woman is to choose. So the superpower of a woman is to be able to take the life of that child if they want. And this is just so telling, because when you look into feminism and when you look into the history of the feminist movement and read books such as Occult Feminism by Rachel Wilson, you see how much these movements are linked with witchcraft and other dark practices. And it really makes you, let's just say, rethink the whole abortion debate and why exactly so many women are so unwaveringly dedicated to this idea. And the fact that she just said that the woman's superpower is to be able to take life, I mean, very telling. Anyways, let's listen to this last bit, which, I mean, speaking of telling.
So my claim is that my bodily autonomy is the prevailing right in this debate.
Thank you. And I feel like that's something that's come back up again and again in the conversation as a through theme that we're having. So I hear what you're saying. I agree that we have bodily autonomy. I have the right to not someone to come and hit me, hurt me, etc. But there's a very unique relationship when a woman is pregnant with another human life, with another body, and that's her son or her daughter. Whether she wanted to get pregnant, intended to get pregnant, when she's pregnant, there's that unique relationship that springs into existence with the existence of that new human life. And a few times it's been said today, well, the science doesn't matter. We're just having my opinion, my personal story. The science does matter a lot, because science can help tell us what is real and what is not real. And science does tell us when human life begins, and it doesn't magically begin at birth. Human life begins before birth, and human life begins at the moment of fertilization. And so, while I'm all for bodily autonomy, I believe that our bodily autonomy as women ends where another human being's life begins. And when I'm pregnant, there's another body inside my body, and they deserve the right to live. And yes, that's gonna mean maybe a few months of me trying to hopefully take care of my body because it's feeding that body, and then delivering that child. And if I feel I can't parent, then there's other options. But I still have a responsibility not to kill that child via an abortion.
So I'm going to tell you a story. So I am a mother. I have a 22-year-old son who has autism. And I became pregnant when he was around 6 years old. And I didn't want to have that child. And so I had an abortion. And I had the abortion when I was about 6 weeks along because it wasn't a child. It was a mass of cells. And I made that decision very distinctly. I didn't have any regrets about that decision. I actually didn't have a lot of debate about that decision. I had a child where I lived in an estate where we didn't have an insurance mandate. So I was working really hard to get my son the help that he needed with his autism. And I did not want to be pregnant. I was in a relationship. We made a choice because that was the choice that I made for the mass of cells that was in my body.
I totally hear what you're saying.
And I need you to understand that it wasn't about what am I killing, what am I keeping alive. It was what was best for my body, because I then would have had to carry that child to term.
And they have innate human value, not because of their capacities, not because of their abilities, but because of their innate human nature that we all share. And human nature doesn't start at birth, doesn't start a few weeks or even a month before birth. It starts at the beginning of a human person's life, which is fertilization.
But that's your opinion. So there isn't actually scientific evidence that states that human life begins at conception.
There is a tremendous amount amount of scientific evidence
there
that
actually-
shows that.
there-
If you
there
open any
isn't.
human biology
What-
textbook, you're going to find that the
No, what-
development process begins with fertilization of the human
what
life.
it says is that
And also,
there
if you're
is-
an in vitro fertilization
what
clinic,
what it says
if you're a
is
technician,
that there is cell multiplication.
but it's not
at
just
that
any cell
moment.
multiplication, because you're made of cells, right? I'm made of cells,
Well, sure.
right? Okay, you and I are clumps of cells, right?
100%.
But we're unique clumps of cells. We're individual clumps of cells that constitute a whole human. And at the moment of fertilization, you know what you got? You got a whole human. They're very small, but you have a
Sometimes-
whole human that just
sometimes-
needs, you have a whole human at the moment of fertilization that just needs time and nourishment to grow, but has a unique genetic distinction,
But it doesn't
distinct
always
from the
go
mother.
that way. So, for
Well, you
example,
could miscarry, yes.
Yeah. So
But
when
that's
I
still
when
a
I
loss
had,
of the- that's
but
still
when
a
I
human
had,
being,
But when I
though.
had my miscarriage,
I'm so
I
sorry.
had a clump of cells that then grew, and then did not grow into a human child.
I have a
Because-
question for you. Did
Yeah.
you said you have a son. How old is he now?
22. Or
I am-
he's 20. Oh my goodness.
You look great, by the way. I have a question. I'm just curious, because you're talking about the baby you miscarried, the baby you had the abortion of, and you called them clumps of cells. Did you see your son when he was unborn as a clump of cell, or did you consider him in your mind as a son, as a
I
human?
didn't consider him a clump of cells.
You did or you didn't?
I did, absolutely. Absolutely.
So for you didn't really feel connected to even him until he was born.
So I knew that until he was actually out of my body, that there was not necessarily a live birth that was going to happen.
So were you
because
kind of-
I lost a child,
I see.
and I understood that having a pregnancy does not mean that you have a live birth and a baby at the end.
That
of
is
it.
absolutely true.
And so
They don't- yeah.
for me, that choice about what is happening to my body, that
Were you
choice,
sad after the miscarriage? I'm just curious. Or were you kind of felt fine afterwards? Because I had a miscarriage too. I felt deeply sad by it.
So I
But
was
women feel differently.
I was ambivalent.
Okay.
I was not ready to have a child, and I was going through a divorce at the time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it sucked.
It sucks,
But
yeah.
also,
So here- yeah.
it was okay because I was not ready to be at that point, and I didn't even make that decision. My body made
here's
that
the thing.
decision for me. While that is still in my body, this is my body. And that is my choice about what happens to the things that are in my body. That is the choice.
Here's a question for you. Your womb. What is the womb designed for? A woman's uterus. What's it designed for?
It is designed to carry a clump of cells to eventually, sometimes, grow a fetus.
And how did you start your life before birth? Where were you?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Come on, you know. Where were you before you were born?
I was in my mother's egg sac.
Okay, you were in your mother's egg sac. You mean you were in her uterus, right?
No, I was in my mother's egg sac, in her literal actual
well,
egg
that
sac.
wasn't you yet. An egg is not you.
The egg was
The
a
fertilized egg.
part of me, and then the other part of me was in my dad's, I guess, testicles.
So
I mean,
it
truly.
wasn't you yet, because you is when there's a whole human, right? And a unique
Yes.
individual
So when I was
genetic
born,
identity.
then yes, then was me.
But the science shows, at the moment of fertilization, sperm egg fusion,
The
you have
science
unique,
doesn't
that's
actually
when
show that.
it does show that you have unique
No,
individual
the
genetic
science
identity
shows-
that's distinct from your
The
parents.
science shows that when an egg is
That is a
fertilized,
fact.
that there is cell multiplication.
But
that does
what
not
kind of
show,
cell multiplication? It's not like skin cells.
Well,
It's not skin cells. What is
sure.
it?
It becomes skin cells.
Well, it
is
develops
cell-
its skin eventually.
Well, sure.
But what is it? What is it? Come on. What is it?
It's a mass of cells.
But what is it? It's a human embryo, right?
Well, yes.
That's developing
But
rapidly.
it is a clump of
But
cells.
we already said we are clumps of cells. So you're kind of using that pejoratively, like, oh, you're a clump of cells. You can be aborted. You can be miscarried. It doesn't matter. Who cares? You and I are clumps of cells. So it's a
not
little
clump- but it's
dehumanizing.
not
You're being a little
well,
dehumanizing.
Yes, I am being dehumanizing
Why?
because it is
Why?
a clump of cells.
But we are clumps of cells. We already, you acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So you're
Because
not wanting to
until-
dehumanize
because
us, right?
until-
Why wouldn't you dehumanize us
because
with that term?
until
But
you are
dehumanize the baby.
actually outside of my body, there are no rights. Because if there were, my friends,
But I keep asking you why.
there were,
and you keep saying just because it's in your body. But why does that
there
child
would
not have
already be
rights?
laws on the books. And currently, there are no laws on the books that say that anything that happens before that birth means that they are not actually life.
That's actually inaccurate. So
No.
even in states like California, there's such a thing. There has been such a thing until recently in the last 2 years as illegal abortions. Are you aware of that? So even in states that are blue states,
No.
there are illegal abortions where it says, yes, before birth, this is a person that has some rights and we're going to protect them. And similarly, if you're
So
Scott
that's
Peterson,
an illegal medical procedure.
one other example.
It's about the medical
But
procedure,
another
not
example,
about the actual
here's
life.
another example.
So
Scott
for
Peterson, he killed his pregnant wife, Lacey, and their unborn son, Connor. Connor, in your view, was just a clump of cells. He wasn't burned yet, but his dad killed him. Should he have been penalized for killing both his wife and the pregnant part of his wife, the baby, the boy, his son, Connor?
No.
So you think Scott Peterson should have got off scot-free for killing his 8-month-old unborn son?
Scott Peterson should have been penalized for killing his live wife.
But not Connor. Connor had no
Connor
rights.
was not alive.
So if
Connor was in her body.
So if I'm a woman,
Connor
so if a
was in
woman's
her body
boyfriend
and was not a human being with rights on this planet.
This
as
is
of
very
yet.
dark because you're saying if a woman is
If it is
pregnant and her
not
boyfriend
alive-
slips drugs into her drink to force an abortion on her, she wants to have this
But
baby,
that is
he puts drugs in her drink. Would you say that there should be no
is
penalties for that man and what he did to her?
procedure against the mother's
But you just said the baby
body.
is not born yet, so it has no
That is against the mother's body, not against that.
What if
that child does not
What
have
if
rights?
it's just a
does
drug
not
designed to
have
kill the
rights.
baby? It's just designed to kill the baby in her womb.
But it's designed to harm the tissue that is in her body because that's her body.
So you're saying
It's
it would
her
have been
body.
wrong. Scott Peterson should have been given penalties for killing Connor,
For harming Lacey.
but not for harming Connor.
For harming Lacey.
So if a man-
So Connor is a part of Lacey, then it's harming Lacey.
So if a man kills his girlfriend's unborn baby, he should
is
not be
harmed-
penalized for
he is
killing the unborn baby, only
harmed-
for
harmed
in
the
some way
mother.
harming her. That's time.
Now, I really like Lila, and I think that she does some fantastic work and has really changed a lot of minds, potentially saved thousands and thousands of babies' lives, etc. So absolutely nothing but respect for the work that she does. However, I tweeted this today, and go check me out on Twitter, guys. Get the most base takes in the world. The issue of abortion will never be settled by reasonable dialogue and listening to / empathizing with pro-abortion activists. All abortion debates are essentially useless, albeit at times entertaining. Sacrifice and infanticide is something that will always be a key feature of the demonic, because nothing is more of an affront to goodness than the murder of an innocent sea. The only way to solve this is through force and legislation. And I really do believe that this will never be something where you'll be able to change their mind. And the only slight amendment that I would make is that sometimes these debates can be useful because a lot of people get brought over to the side of the good. And also, I think that people tend to make excuses and rationalizations for these women far too often. I mean, Lila is suggesting here, and I watched Lila's coverage of this video after, her theory is that this woman has dehumanized her children because she had this miscarriage and she's so afraid of losing the child that she just dehumanizes it. Now, guys, my rule in life when it comes to being discerning and reading people is watch what people do and not what they say. However, if they say something and then act in the exact same way, then my work is really done. So why not just listen to exactly what she says and does and believe her? She said she had an abortion and had zero regrets. She said she had no regard for the child, and she keeps on calling it a child, by the way.
I was not ready to have a child.
And I'd love to know from her point of view when it becomes a child, but she said her only concern was for her own body. She clearly said that she was okay with the fact that she had a miscarriage because she wasn't ready anyway, and
It was okay.
that her body made that decision for her.
I didn't even make that decision. My body made that decision for me.
Which is quite frankly one of the weirdest and most disturbing things I've ever heard. She blatantly has no regard for the life of an unborn child and is quite frankly just a deranged person. Sorry, I mean, I'm not really interested in making excuses for people like that. So at this point, I'm just convinced that this whole issue of abortion is not something that we can sort of arrive at a reasonable conclusion with, where everybody can sort of join in on the side of the good. I actually think that this is a deeply spiritual and religious problem, and that these people actually worship at the altar of abortion. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to reason with these people, but credit to Lila for trying. She's a much more patient person than I am. But anyways, guys, don't forget to check out Ground News right below. The links will all be there. Fantastic sponsor of the channel, and we do appreciate it. And also, if you'd like to check out my links, my Twitter and everything will be right below. And if you'd like to watch another one, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.